one of our sessions. I'm Mark Stoddard. I run sales and marketing here at ClientSuccess. Got Dave Blake, CEO of ClientSuccess. And of course, our guest today, Greg Daines, CEO of Client Velocity. Greg, Dave, how's it going, gentlemen?
Great. Happy to be here.
Not bad. It's always great to be with Greg Daines, so pretty excited about today.
It's a good day, man. Good day. Cool. Can everybody, we got a bunch of folks that are still filtering in. Can you just triple check that you can hear us? Maybe just shoot me a quick note in the chat pane. Give me a thumbs up or something, just to make sure that our audio and our video works. Looks like we got thumbs up. So, all right, loud and clear. Well, good. So let's jump into it. So we're, like I said, we are pumped to have Greg on today. To give you a little bit of background, you haven't heard Greg talk before, or this is your first time listening to him, ton of really cool, relevant experience. He's probably spent the first 20 years of his career as a SaaS founder, CEO. So really early on in the SaaS customer success game. And what he does now is he works as a strategic advisor to all sorts of SaaS companies to help improve all things related to growth, whether that's retention, sales, customer success. And so we've been wanting to have him on since we started this, because whenever we talk to Greg, Dave and I, we always get a ton out of it. He's got some really cool insights, really thought-provoking ideas, always really forces us to challenge our kind of conventional thinking. And a bunch of the other operators we've had on the series, he's also worked with them and he's been an advisor to them. A lot of you will remember a few weeks ago, we had Julie from Drift on, and she gave a really cool session on what they're doing around customer experience. And after she and I wrapped up, she's like, you got to have Greg on, like, because all that stuff that I just shared, like, it actually came out of his head. So I'm really excited to have Greg on. And, you know, you guys are going to learn a ton from him. He's going to talk about the cardinal sin of customer success, as well as other things. I think before we jump into things with Greg, I think, Dave, you wanted to share a couple things, and then we'll turn it over to you, Greg. Dave, can you hear us okay?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for being here, everybody. Just, I'm going to ask a couple questions for the audience, and if you could answer in the chat. First is, who's here for the first time? We've been doing this webinar series for, I don't know, Mark, 6 weeks, 8 weeks?
I think it's going on 12.
12 weeks. Okay, time's flying in COVID quarantine. Sorry, but 12 weeks, and we do this twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday at this same time, except for we're mixing it up a little bit for our friends in Europe, and welcome all those. So look, there's several who are here for the first time. There's some long timers here as well. Thank you. Also would love to hear where you're coming in from. Usually we have it all over the world, so if you want to give a shout out of where you're coming in from. And then tell me in your chat if you know somebody who's been in the customer success space that's been laid off recently, that's been impacted. Hey, David, good to see you again. Congrats on your new opportunity. David Leibowitz, sorry. Well, good, we got people all over the place. We usually talk about help one, hire one. We are seeing people being rehired, which is awesome. So if you can help a friend find a job, please do. Or if you can hire, please do. The last one is if you know who we are. We're not a webinar company. We're actually a software company. If you know who ClientSuccess is and seen our platform, I'd love to see a shout out there if you've seen our platform. Cool. There's some great things.
Shout out.
People from, we know you. Cool, Garrett. Good to have you back. Well, maybe before I introduce, say a few words about Greg, just want to give a cool announcement that we found out about this week. Mark, if you want to transition, we were excited to win the CODIE Award. For those who aren't familiar with the CODIE Awards, it's an award for all kinds of technology out there, usually the best of different categories, put on by the SIIA. And we're excited this week to learn that we were announced as the best customer success solution out there. So we're excited about that. It's a huge tribute to our team who comes to work passionate to contribute to the community, to build solutions that help in the community and that help our customers. So thank you to our team and our customers. And we'd love to show you our platform sometime. We're a customer success platform. We help you with from onboarding to renewal and everything in between. And we're excited to be there. So if you haven't done it, please check us out at ClientSuccess.com. Send us an email at sales@ClientSuccess.com or marketing or Dave@ClientSuccess.com, whatever you want. We'd love to help you in any way we can. Now, with all that said, yes, with all that said, I'm going to share my 2 cents about Greg Daines. Really excited to have Greg Daines here. Mark shared some great stuff, but Greg is one of the most brilliant thought leaders out there. And I use the word brilliant in a very specific way because he is just, every time I talk to him, my mind just is blown. He brings a very data-driven and practical perspective on customer success, on SaaS, on go-to-market, on everything. As Mark said, he makes you think differently. He challenges you in a very intelligent way. So he brings a great IQ and EQ to the table. He's also a good friend here in Utah. And so, Greg, thanks for being here with us. I'm going to step away and let you two do your thing, but extremely excited for our audience to get acquainted with you today. So thanks, Greg. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Dave.
Oh yeah, and maybe just one more thing before we jump into things with Greg. We've been running this session, as Dave said, for about 10, 12 weeks now, and we've been really thrilled about the quality of speakers and content that we've had on the series so far, and we want to keep that going. And so I wanted to do just a quick call for speakers. And so if there is other thought leaders, other operators, other people that you think have a really interesting take on what's going on in customer success right now in 2020, I'd love to meet them. You could shoot me a note, mark@clientsuccess.com, and happy to chat with them and see if they'd be a good fit for the webinar series. You could also just shoot me a note in the chat pane if there's somebody that you want us to chat with and have on. Would love to just meet all of the other folks of similar caliber to Greg, so we can keep the content coming. But with all that being said, let's jump into things with Greg. I'm gonna, let's see. I think Greg, you want to share your screen, so I'm gonna pause sharing on my side and let you take over the reins. And yeah, you should have the ability to share now. Does that work?
I think so. Tell me
there
if
we
you
go.
see my
Perfect.
slide.
Yep, I see
You
it.
got
Perfect.
it?
Yep, looks great.
All right, great. Well, thanks, Mark, and thanks, Dave. That was too kind. So this is an interesting time. It's an interesting role to be in. I say this every time, but I really think customer success is the most interesting, function in business. I really do. And I want to dig into a couple of dynamics that I think have really played out and been very interesting lately. And Dave mentioned that I work with a lot of clients who are SaaS companies, really digging into the challenges of customer success, because really in the heart of that somewhere is ties to everything we do, ties to growth, ties to everything we do. So I want to share one sort of insight that I've seen that I think is really profoundly tied into how different companies perform in client success. So essentially, that insight is this. I think, from my perspective, whenever I look at companies and how they're approaching client success, even looking back on how I approached it for many years, it's profoundly reactive, right? Everything we do is about being responsive and reactive. And there's a good reason for that, obviously, and that is that fundamentally we serve our clients and we need them to have their needs met. That's why we exist, right? But I think just understanding how fundamentally reactive we are makes people uncomfortable, makes me uncomfortable. I think generally people would all agree with that, although it's not entirely clear what to do about it. And I want to dig into that today. So just thinking about how reactive we really are, right? We react in every situation, right? We react because they ask for help. We should react. They complain. We react to that. if something goes horribly wrong or they stop using the solution, or even when they're happy, even when they're expressing satisfaction, right, with what we're doing, we are reacting to that. And it's hard to get out of that mode of operation because, first of all, we should be reactive in the sense of we're not going to ignore our clients, right? That's not the better approach. That's not but because we're so reactive, because we're kind of consumed with the day-to-day of being responsive to our clients, it's easy to become completely captured in that mode, everything we do to sort of be operating in that mode. And like I said, that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. It's challenging because deep down, I think we all know that there's so much we have to offer, and it's hard to offer that when we're operating in a reactive way. So this is a setup for me to share with you something I've kind of noticed, and this may not be perfect, but it really represents something that I've seen over and over and over again, and it's my 4 types of client success reps. Now, some of you may have read the Challenger sale or heard of that. In there, they talk about the 4 types of sales reps, right? It's actually defined in certain personas, and so I've taken the liberty to do that with client success. So here are my 4 types of client success reps and how this relates to this topic. So the first one, I call the pleaser, all right? The pleaser is kind of your classic, terrific client success rep, very oriented towards satisfying the client, right? And it's built on just a theory about the way the world works, a belief, which is that if we can make the client satisfied, then that's what creates loyalty. That's why they'll stay, right? And it may not always be expressed exactly this way, but in a lot of cases, right, this idea comes across as the client or the customer is always right. And look, it's nothing wrong with satisfying a client, right? We have to actually meet their needs. So in many ways, the pleaser is the epitome, in a way, of customer success. Obviously, it's founded on a very reactive mode. Okay, well, that's one. My second type is what I call the hero. Now, the hero doesn't assume that the customer is always right. Their understanding goes a little bit further. They're clear that, in fact, the client could be doing things wrong. But the hero is oriented toward, again, in a reactive way, showing up to supply expertise and to help and to rescue, in a way, after the client has gotten into trouble. This is a very satisfying way to operate, and it's very tempting to become to get pulled into the hero mode. Because frankly, a lot of our client success people are smart. They've done it for a while. They have a real sense of what is important. But there's this mode you can get into, which is wait till there's a fire and then show up and put it out. And that can be satisfying, partly because it feels effective, right? You feel like I showed up, I was able to put it out, I was able to get the situation under control, and now things are settled down again. Or are they? So this is a really interesting question. Dave mentioned I like data. I like to ask questions of data that are logical, that are intuitive. And so I took this to some data. We have a bunch of data. We're lucky enough to have collected really a large amount of data about customer success interactions, clients, et cetera. And so we asked this question: is a rescue really effective? And the way we asked the question was, well, if it's effective, then customers who've been rescued would have a similar long-term retention rate than as customers who haven't been rescued. That is, the rescue was effective, they get back on the same track as everyone else. But this was the result. Now, this data set, the broad retention rate was 70%. So not phenomenally high. There were definitely retention challenges, but it was quite a large data set. It's 25,000 data points. So really interesting that the rescued customers, if you look at them after the rescue, so we needed a long time series. What we discovered was rescued customers do half as well, in fact, significantly worse than customers who'd never been rescued. And you think about why that is. What's the intuition behind that? What explains that? Well, if you think about it, a lot of times what we're doing in a rescue are things that sort of just patch up or sort of meet the temporary emergency, but don't fundamentally resolve the issues. And so this is a fascinating thing, because you've been there, right? You have a rescue, something went really badly, everybody jumped in to help, everyone did their best, all good. We got the client back on track, they're back to green, and then, you know, it's handshakes and pats on the back all around because we got there. How often, I ask myself, with clients I've worked with or in my own companies, did we go back and see whether that rescue really took, whether it really addressed the issue? Well, this data, we've seen similar data in other situations. So I think it's quite consistent, and it's a fascinating thing that rescues aren't really always rescues. And so I think it's worth kind of thinking about this hero complex that some kind of teams and or reps get kind of into. And the hero complex, I think, is one that's very tempting. So that's my second persona. Here's my third persona. I call it the enabler. So the enabler, like the hero, also knows that the customer isn't always right, that they could do things which would lead them off track, right? But they believe, and they believe that it's not really their place, right? There's a line, in a sense, between the things we do and the software we provide and the training that we offer and, you know, maybe some general advice, but how a client operates their business beyond how they use our solutions, kind of not our business, kind of, you know, not our place to get involved. Well, that's challenging because, of course, the way the client operates is extraordinarily connected to how well they will do, how good the results are, right? And so that's where the enabler gets in, and you know an enabler because they frequently are very smart, actually. They frequently know a lot. But they're also the ones I think you frequently hear complaining, particularly about clients, right? It's kind of the customer's fault, right? They did it wrong, et cetera. Well, they're probably right, but they're using that to justify not taking responsibility for the client's outcomes. And that's the difference with the enabler. Is there's a sense of you know, I'm off the hook because I did what I do, and the client didn't do what they should have done. So that's why I call that the enabler. Now, the last one is my favorite. This is the one that I think addresses this and shows the contrast, and I call it the agent. Okay, what's an agent? Someone who takes responsibility for their client, right? As if it's their own problem, right? So they take responsibility for the client's results. They're also aware, like the last two, that fundamentally the client, you know, needs to do certain things, and if they don't, they won't get good results. But the agent sees it in a different light. They look at the responsibility they've taken for that client's outcomes as a justification to intervene, to help that client, right? To jump in and say, hey, you're getting off track, and here's the critical things you need to do to succeed. And if you don't, you're not going to get the results everybody was hoping for. So what can I do to help? Now, it's possible, you know, to think of the agent as sort of, well, they're the obnoxious one, right? They're the ones that are constantly telling the client they're wrong. Being an agent isn't a personality type, right? It's a practice. It's a habit. It's a practice born out of essentially fundamentally taking responsibility for the client's outcomes. And if you do that, it actually gives you a sense of purpose, a sense of destiny, if you want to call it that, that's why we exist. And if we don't help the client get to those results, we haven't achieved our purpose. We haven't figured out what we're for. So I'm going to set the agent up as kind of the prototype of our proactive model of client success. So before we dive into how to be proactive, let's just talk for a minute about why being reactive is so toxic. And I'm going to start by essentially framing up a really fundamental thing that I like to say, which is that the difference between successful clients and failed clients is that the successful clients are the ones that achieved measurable, right, significant measurable results against their objectives. And if you look at churn, there's lots of reasons for churn. Obviously, I'm aware of that. Thousands of customers in my career behind me. Clearly, there are many reasons for churn. But what's interesting is to, instead of asking what are all the reasons for churn, ask what are the reasons for success. And the truth is there are only a few. There's only, in a way, one reason for success. And I learned this, I think it was driven home in particular by an experience I had. I had Apple as a client, Apple Computer, Apple Inc. And for many years, I lived in Silicon Valley, and they were my client, and they were a very difficult client. It was challenging to work with them. They were constantly dissatisfied. They were very demanding. And there was a sense of that we could never get ahead of that. We could never be successful in their eyes. And it was wearing on me, right? You've had this experience, I'm sure. And so at one point, I actually kind of lost my patience and said something to the effect of, if you don't like us so much, if you're so dissatisfied, why don't you just leave? And the client looked at me kind of odd and said, why would we leave when you make us so much money? And my first reaction was to feel a little bit ashamed, because why did I ever think it was about anything else? Right? This fundamental idea that satisfaction is the clearest signal that what we're doing is working and they'll stick around is a very dangerous belief. There really aren't compelling, there isn't compelling evidence that satisfaction is a predictor of retention. In the data we have, and it's quite extensive, but I've also seen other studies, it shows that actually satisfaction is not a predictor at all of long-term retention. So that's an interesting thing. Of all the reasons why clients churn, the most common one, and also the one we have the most leverage against, is this fundamental issue of whether or not they're seeing those results. So that's why principle one for me that I would share with you is a suggestion. In your practice, look at what you're doing, focus on success, not failure. The way I think of it is, problems don't cause clients to fail, which means that resolving problems won't always cause them to succeed. So here's a story that I think will give an example of that. So I had a very large client, Fortune 500 client up in the Northeast, and I inherited them while they were a 9-alarm fire. They were flashing red, everything was going wrong, there was lots of anger and frustration. And so I flew out there and sat there while they showed me a list of problems. It was 200 and something, I can't remember the number, over 200 problems. They had them listed in a spreadsheet with detailed notes on every one, all of which had to be resolved or they wouldn't be satisfied. And so I patiently listened while we went through all the problems. And I said, okay, good. Can you rank these by how important they are? Yeah, well, we've already done that. Okay, good. So this is the order of importance. Excellent. So now let me ask this question. Which of these problems have a specific impact on your business results? Not whether they're problems or not. We know that. We've established that this is bad and you hate this. But specifically, which ones of these are reducing the amount of business results that you're getting from the solution? Because we'll want to go after those first, right? Can we agree on that? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so we spent quite a bit of time going through. Do you want to guess how many ended up being relevant to business results? The answer was maybe one. There was one that potentially had an indirect, could have an indirect effect on their business results out of 200 something. And that was a very interesting moment of kind of clarity for everybody. And so we said, well, are you getting business results? So they hadn't bothered to measure it. So we went and measured it with them, and we reconnected with the business sponsor. And he was not aware whether they'd gotten results. He only knew they were complaining. And so we measured the results. Turns out they were getting phenomenal results. And as a result, we were able to put their problems into the, now we still fix them. Obviously, we're going to fix problems with our software and address issues in our relationship, etc. But because of that simple reframing around what's the fundamental purpose of this, right? These are never technology projects, they're business projects. That was able to put things back into the right perspective and understand what's the real core purpose of this. And problems weren't in fact getting in the way, and we were able to really vastly improve the relationship, get back on track, properly prioritize the issues. Okay, so that's why I say problems, yes, we address them, but we don't misinterpret them. Second principle, success takes time. This is the thing about success, right? If we're going to implement a new way of doing things with new technology, and the client's doing it obviously for business reasons, then there's some period of time where that process of implementing and changing how they operate has to take place before they can see those improved results. It's longer in some types of systems than others, but it's never zero time, right? So that amount of time is really important to understand. And that's why being reactive is so pernicious, because if a client is, already failing, we have very little time left to address it. In fact, you could argue we have no time left, because now the failure's already occurred and it's only a question of whether we can rescue it. And I've already shown you that those results are not phenomenal. Well, that's why I feel like the critical skill set in client success is not so much preventing churn as it is getting ahead, seeing it in advance. So that's my third principle. The key to reducing churn is to be able to predict it. Now, I want to say one thing, which is that nobody should be talking about eliminating churn, making churn go away completely. That's not even reasonable. We make bets on clients, right? And sometimes those bets pay off and other times they don't. What we're focused on is reducing the bulk of churn that's a function of us, of our what would we say, process of partnering with those clients to help them be successful. And that's also a huge leverage opportunity, but it doesn't mean there will never be another churn. And the reason I point that out is that if a client churns for a reason we don't have control over, then this method won't work, right? What we're focusing on is the center, the bulk, the primary driver of success in churn, and also the main thing we have leverage against, right, which is their measurable results. So the beauty of this mindset is that we don't have to spend all our resources, waste them in a way, chasing around all these different potential causes of churn, many of which we don't have control over, and focus on the central biggest one, which is the difference between having really exceptional retention and having poor retention. And we've seen this over and over again. So that's why, for me, the primary skill set in client success is most importantly focused on predicting churn. Now, I like to say you can't prevent churn if you don't predict it. I think that gets to this point that success takes time. So only when I'm in a position to be ahead of it, to see it coming afar off, am I in a position to address the fundamental issues that are going to make a difference. We'll talk in a minute about what those are. But that's the kind of the nub of my argument today, is that you can't prevent churn if you don't know how to predict it. So how do you predict it? Well, you can't predict it if you don't understand fundamentally what the dynamics are. Okay, so this is one of my favorite things to say is clients don't leave because they have a reason to leave. They leave when they no longer have a compelling reason to stay. So you probably had this experience where you go out and you survey customers when they exit. You ask them why, what's your reason to leave, and you kind of bring all those ideas back and you look at them, and there's all sorts of problems with that. One problem is they give you tons of different reasons, and it's really hard to nail down, the big themes that are driving it. But we do so because we sort of interpret things and we kind of cram them into categories. And the other problem with it is that you go out and solve those problems, and I've never seen it reduce churn. So that's a really interesting problem. And my argument is that that's what they're saying, right? And sincerely saying is the reason they're leaving, but fundamentally, it's really driven by the lack of a compelling reason to live with that pain. So they'll tell you what their pain is, but it's like the Apple story, right? I shared. So here's an example where they were experiencing a lot of frustration, but they were willing to live with it because of how much value it was creating. Now, we always want to reduce frustration, and that is a major thing that we have to work on, but it won't be of any use unless we're also simultaneously producing that value, making sure they can get that value. So, so what's fundamental to that then? If they don't leave because they have reason to leave, and they do leave when they no longer have a good reason to stay, then what is that? It's fundamentally about, getting those results. So, story on this, I had a client, big tech company, you'd know it well. And I inherited them when I joined a company, and they were our success story. They'd been on stage for us, bragging about us. And so this was kind of the opposite case. Instead of going out to solve a problem, I flew out to find out what had they done? What was fundamental to their success? Why were they so much more successful than some of the other clients? Which I consider to be one of the most interesting questions in business. Why are your most successful clients so much more successful? There's got to be some core reasons there. So I wanted to go find out. And I've learned you don't ask clients because they'll tell you things, but they usually don't have the same ability to be self-aware and see patterns in their behavior that are broad-based and that would apply to other people. So I like to observe. So I went out to observe. The guy was phenomenal, very friendly, took me around the building, showed me all the things they did. And one of the first questions I asked was, well, so, how's the system working for you guys? I'm the new guy, right? I get to ask that question. He said, oh, the system doesn't work. I said, what? He said, well, we've had some problems, right? We're never able to, there was an integration issue. We've actually, never been able to completely get it there. We're close. I think we're going to get there pretty soon, but I said, wait. You've been a client for 2 years. You've been on stage bragging about the results we produce for you, and you've never turned on the system? He said, yeah, no, I know, it's embarrassing, but we've got some work to do. We're close. I said, well, hold on. How did you get the results if you never turned on the system? And he explained to me that as a part of joining our company, they received some very useful skills training and sort of process training about how to do their work better. And that training, they'd taken it to heart. It was actually a specific way they should operate that was proven to be much more effective. And they implemented this, and it had immediately produced phenomenally better results. I tell this story because it's a very interesting example that reminds us, it's extreme, I understand, but it reminds us of a core thing that we need to not let go of, which is the technology that we provide is not fundamentally the reason our clients' business improves. If you look at your successful clients, you'll see, in addition to implementing our technology, which is essential, they're also making critical behavior and process changes. And those behavior and process changes are at the heart of this. So here's the giveaway. The question on the title of this session was, what's the cardinal sin of client success? That's why I say the cardinal sin of client success isn't churn. It's unexpected churn. So just to be clear, yes, clients are going to churn. If we have too many clients churning, a core thing to look at, to examine in our process is, do we fundamentally know why some clients succeed and others don't? Because if we do, if we can distill that to its essence, the core things, not the 100 things the best clients do, the few things they do, then that's something we can help them do, observe them doing, track if they don't, and then immediately when they don't, we're in a position to help them make that change long before they know they're failing. That's a powerful position to be in. And so we have to, in essence, build systems that prevent churn. Systems that prevent churn are systems that observe the essential behaviors of the client that are, that are critical for their achieving success. So that's what I want to talk about now. How to predict churn. Okay, so I've talked about it very much in terms of client behavior. Now, let's just be clear, there's a ton of things that have to happen for a client to be successful. The fact that I'm not going to talk about them right now does not mean, for instance, that we have to be very effective with our product. It has to not break or go down. But we have to clearly implement it correctly and make sure it's configured for their needs. We have to train them how to use it. All of those things are a given in the conversation that I'm having. But there's this whole other dimension that many of the companies that I work with haven't really grasped, and that is that this retention machine, right, is driven by the individual behaviors of all those companies. And if you look at, I talked about looking at your most successful customers, which I think is one of the most important things you can do. If you look at a bunch of them, what you'll see, don't ask them, observe them, right, and interview them, investigate. What you'll see is that there's just a few behaviors that drive why some clients are more successful than others. So think about your business right now. Think about your clients, right? Some of them are just doing better. And others that look actually in many ways the same as those successful companies are not doing well. They're going sideways or they're just drifting. That difference is really interesting. And if you study it, I think what you'll find is, this is what I found, is that there's a few critical behaviors at the core that the most successful companies are doing and the others aren't. And those are really good indicators. So this is why, when I think about indicators of what we call client health, client success, right? We have actually two kinds of indicators that we want to track. The normal ones are important. They're the lagging indicators. They're things that show up as clear signals that there's trouble when something's gone wrong. So the lagging indicators are outcomes of failure, right? They show up and they're evident when the client has already failed. But leading indicators are the essence of how you predict churn. These are causes of failure. These show up before the client's failed. So they're not really detectable to the client as such, but they are detectable to us as long as we've clearly identified what they are. We'll talk about that. But the difference between leading and lagging indicators, I think, is a really big difference between highly effective client success organizations and everybody else. So let's talk about what a lagging indicator is. This is just a few examples. Obviously, client stops using our system. That's not a leading indicator, right? Now, they may not have churned, meaning they may not have actually canceled their contract or not renewed. But let's worry less about when they actually terminate. Let's focus on when they fail. A drop in client usage, or maybe they stop using, that's actually after they've failed. That's not before they've failed. Think about why that is, right? If something isn't perceived to be worth it and producing the benefits they thought they were signing up to do, or it's too hard or whatever, they stopped or reduced using. That's a core indicator that something's gone wrong, that the failure has already sort of been come in. Clients disappointed with results, clients telling you or indicating that they're shopping for alternatives or they're not responding. There's lots of lagging indicators, and it's very important to get them right. I've argued that whether a client's satisfied is not a particularly good predictor or indicator of churn. And you can test this intuitively. How many times have you had a client leave, right? And on the way out, say what a great experience it was, right? That happens all the time. And then conversely, you have clients that are unhappy, frustrated, complaining, and yet they keep renewing, right? Intuitively, it just doesn't map that satisfaction's a real good, compelling indicator of retention or churn. So, okay, there's your lagging indicators. What are leading indicators? Well, here's some good examples of what we're talking about with leading indicators. We're talking about the clients, involved in whatever, taking on this new process, and there are some critical things they need to do to get the benefits the system produces and they're not doing them. The truth is, at that moment, they're probably completely unaware that they're on the track to failure. In many cases, they're very happy. This is the new period. This is early. Things are going well. They're excited. They can see that, they use it, whatever. So it's rarely the case that we can determine this client's in trouble by observing their mood. But we know they're in trouble. We should, because unless they make those key behavior changes, they're not going to get to those results. Here's another one. We're in the process of implementing the solution. Something goes wrong, they can't do a piece of it. Whatever it is, there's some integration, there's some data, there's some element. And it's like, okay, well, we'll just live without that. Well, wait up. If they don't do that piece, what's the impact on the business results down the road? In many cases, it's quite significant. If we just say, well, okay, if you can't, you can't, we've failed to identify what is a critical leading indicator of failure, and they've been allowed to remain uninformed as to what the impact that's going to have. We might even argue with them and say, you got to do it. But unless it's clear, and this has to go all the way up to the business owner on the client side, that has a significant business impact, they're not going to be able to kind of understand the impact of it and the importance of it. Here's one. Client buys a new system, the business owner is very excited, hands it down to someone to take over, and sort of disengages after that. Says, hey, you know what, call me when the results come in or something like that. Well, we all have seen this, right? That's not a good sign. Their disengagement means the project will take on a meaning that it didn't have. Originally, it was a business project. Now, handed down to someone else, it could very easily become a technology project. And that story I told with the 200 problem, that's exactly what had happened in that case. And this is where losing track of the business process is so important. So here's an intuition to test whether there's such a thing as a leading indicator. I can prove it, I think. So imagine for a moment, have you ever had an experience where you've just gotten off a brand new client pickup call, right? First call, first time you met them, and you've looked at your partner or you've looked at yourself and said, oh man, they're not gonna make it. They're gonna fail, right? You've had that experience, I'm sure, many times where just whatever happened in that meeting was such clear signals of trouble that you just knew that project's in trouble. I'm not sure they're going to make it. Well, that's proof that what I'm talking about is a real thing, right? Your instincts or your reaction is based on something quite real. This is why we have humans do this job, right, instead of robots. The reality is that there are factors that we know precede their ability to really knock it out of the park or not. So this is the question I would ask. Ask yourself, and it's going to be different in every business, but what signs have you seen early on, long before failure arrives, that you think or know are clearly signs of trouble? And I'm sure you have some that you can name, right? The executive sponsor is disengaged. They've handed it down to someone who's not in any position of authority. They've indicated to you that they're not going to make any meaningful changes in their business process. They want it done fast and they don't want to have to be trained. It doesn't matter. There are probably many examples of these things. Here's a classic one. They've indicated in one way or the other that they think the technology on its own is going to make them highly successful, and they haven't really thought through all the implications of what they need to change. Here's another one. They don't have a strategy. They don't even know what business results they're looking for. They don't measure the results, so they won't know if they even arrive. All these are leading indicators, and I'm sure you can think of many, many more. So that's the opportunity. I think I call it challenge and opportunity in client success is to figure out which fundamental factors, and it's usually client behaviors, are the most essential to success. Can we teach them and help clients adopt them? And can we track them so that we know far in advance when a client's in trouble and we can intervene and help them get back on track? So that's what it means to me to be operating proactively. So the critical thing to operating proactively is what I call expertise, leading with expertise. Clients don't always know what they need to do to be successful. And in fact, if you think about it, the clients who are the most at risk of failure are the ones who know the least about what they have to do to change and are usually the least likely also to ask. And so this is why I talk about expertise. I think of expertise in a very specific way as being essentially what knowledge, in addition to all the other good things we're doing, is essential for this customer to have to know how they can get the results our most successful customers have gotten. And I just want to back into this a little bit with a kind of a logical kind of thought process. And I know it's super simple, but it's kind of helpful to ask. I think one of the most interesting questions in business is, why do clients stay, right? Why do they stay? Not so much why they buy, because there are a lot of reasons potentially why clients buy. There are fewer reasons why they stay, right? Okay, and those are the ones we're most interested in, because that's what drives retention, long-term retention and expansion. Okay, so why do they stay? Well, my argument is because they achieve successful results. Results that are business results relative to the goals of the project that are measurable and meaningful. Okay, well, that only begs another question, which is, why do some clients succeed? Because they don't all succeed, so this is really important. My argument, fundamentally, the primary driver for the bulk of clients who succeed is that they enact the key behavior changes, process changes, changes in how they work that lead to them receiving the benefits the solution is designed to produce. Okay, but that only begs another question, and that is, why do some clients change? That's an interesting question, and in fact, one that's worth immense amounts of study and effort. Because if you could unpack why some clients made those changes and what they were, you'd be in possession of, I think, the most powerful weapon you could have in a client success operation. Because that's the thing that gives you the sharpest leverage against client success and failure. So why do clients change? This is a simple answer, but I believe it's profoundly true, because they know how. Now think about, you have clients who know how. You didn't have to tell them how. Very frequently, at an early stage in a tech company, a number or even most of the clients you get seem to have this intuition that the world is changing. This is a new way of doing things. They've got to get on it. They get the solution. They make those changes, and we didn't have to get all that involved. And that can lull us into a real sense of false security, that that's a piece of the equation we don't have to solve for. But I would argue, as companies mature, as a space matures, and more competitors get involved, and more customers adopt that solution, the nature of those clients changes. They become, I call them late adopters, early adopters, late adopters. They're not your innovators, right? They're more like your majority. And the majority very frequently can get excited about a new change. They can understand that the future is going to change, but they very frequently don't know how. They don't have the clarity that some of our earlier customers had on precisely how to do it. And so we may have grown up as a startup working with clients who really get it and didn't need us to hold their hand through that process change, but only to discover that the bulk of the market is not nearly so prescient. They don't have that same sense of clarity around what the new world, what the new process needs to look like. And so fundamentally, we need to think through, as we mature, we have this unique front row seat to see how the successful companies do it. And we have an opportunity to glean from that, to discern what the pattern is. What's the fundamental behavior that makes these successful companies so much better at it than others, to distill that into principles that can be taught to help our clients who are at the more mature stages of the market, the bulk of the clients, understand what they have to do. And so this is how I define expertise, actually, is it's knowledge of those specific behavior process changes that are the ones that are fundamental to success. And so there's a process you can go by to distill this type of expertise, and it's essentially these 5 things. And this is what I do with a lot of my clients, and there's no reason anyone couldn't do this. First, we ask not just what did our clients adopt, how did they use our system, that's important, but what other things are they doing? What behaviors, processes, work modes are unique to successful customers that later customers, more customers don't know about, don't understand. And those behaviors tend to be the most useful markers for the difference between successful and failing customers. And secondly, they're specific. They're not general, like they have, well, here's a good one. They have good support from leadership. Yeah, that's true, but it's so general, I don't know how to teach that. I could just say, hey, client, you should have good support from leadership. Okay, fine, well and good. No, we need to get more specific. What specifically do leaders do in the successful client that we could teach them to do, that they could model exactly, get specific? Third, only the essentials. If we look at a successful client, and this is a mistake lots of business books and business gurus make, they say, you know, look at Apple or look at Amazon or something and say, look at all the things they do right. Just do all those things. First of all, it's impractical, right? But more importantly, it's actually unnecessary. There are in any given business a few core behaviors that drive the difference between success and failure. It's kind of an expression of the 80-20 rule. 20% or some small portion of the behaviors drive the vast majority of the value. And that doesn't mean whatever, the Apples and Amazons of the world won't continue to be better in many ways. It means that for someone else, the primary difference of crossing over that line into higher performance is driven by just a few things. Observe. I talked about, you don't just ask your clients, right? What are you doing? It's like, you know, hey, Michael Jordan, what did you do? You know, I had a heart of a lion, right? It's really hard to unpack, even for yourself, what you did, but you can observe it. And actually, we're in a unique position to do this really well, because unlike our clients, we can see across many clients. We can actually, we sit at the top of Mount Olympus and we can observe all of the things and see actually only a few of those things are really essential. And in many cases, clients aren't even aware enough of what they're doing to clearly articulate it. So you really do have to do, you can talk to them and investigate and interview. That's certainly part of what I do, but I also like to observe. And that's when you'll really be able to see what are those differences. And then codified. I don't believe it's expertise unless it's written down, because just because you know doesn't mean it's something we can all leverage as a team and build systems around, systems of success. All right, so 4 keys to being proactive, and then I'll stop. We'll do some questions. Number 1, we need to understand clearly why some clients succeed rather than others. If you got together and brainstormed, you'd probably come up with 50 reasons. I've done this a lot, but it isn't 50. That's when you go investigate, you watch, you observe, you interview, you figure out what are the common fundamental essential behaviors that separate your successful from your unsuccessful clients. Second, if you know what those are, not only should we be codifying them, teaching them to our clients, helping them learn to do those new behaviors, but we should also be tracking whether they do. Because now finally we have, in a way, the holy grail of client success. We have that leading indicator that tells us when a client's off track long before they know they're off track. And that's powerful. So those leading indicators are really just an expression of how well we've distilled our knowledge, our understanding of why clients succeed. Third, when clients aren't on track, when they don't make key behavior changes, knowing that is of no use to us unless we take it back to the client and challenge them on it. Now, this isn't about being obnoxious, but it's also not about being fundamentally driven by satisfaction, because if you only think your job exists to satisfy the customer, then in many cases we won't challenge them. We won't say, hey, I'm seeing that you guys are not on track to get results, and if you don't make these changes, you won't get there. How can I help you get there? I'm willing to invest our time and make sure you have the ability to succeed. That's not rude. That's having the client's best interests at heart. That's being an agent. And then lastly, measure and materialize results to build momentum. It's hard to change, right? Clients, you're asking them to do something that in many cases is the hardest thing they'll ever do. Change is hard, right? I can't even get myself to change in many cases. So let's not kid ourselves. It's extraordinarily challenging. And yet, when we succeed, produces phenomenal results. If you want a client to make a little bit of change, promise them a little bit of results. Help them see that. When you're able to show even a small degree of success, measured success, they're able to build on that and create momentum, share that with other people, create a sense of, hey, this is working, let's get on board with this. Building momentum is powerful. If they have to make changes and they can't see results for years, I don't fancy the chances of that program being successful. You have to find ways to measure and materialize those results to clients. Those are my 4 fundamental keys to switching from that reactive mode we talked about to the proactive mode, to becoming the agent in client success. And with that, I'll stop talking. We can do some Q&A.
It's been fantastic. Yeah, we definitely have a little bit of time available for questions. And so speaking of kind of this move toward being more proactive, like Josh asked a question kind of toward the beginning of, you know, his question is, do you think it's more natural to start more reactive as you first introduce customer success into your organization, and then as you improve processes become more proactive? Or do you think it's, you know, you start more proactive right out of the gate? Do you have any opinions or thoughts there?
Yeah, well, we observe it's almost universal to start reactive and then get proactive if you ever do. So I think that's a fair observation. But I also think there's a good reason for that. And that is that when it's early on, even if the company's been around, if client success is a new function, there's a lot of learning. There's a lot of observation before we really have distilled some of this knowledge, right? So startups come to me and say, you know, how can we start this way? The truth is, in a way you can't, because the key knowledge of what matters for driving success is something that we learn and develop. We may have theories about it early on, but we really learn a lot from our most successful clients. And so I do think there is a natural progression from being more reactive to then distilling that knowledge. The only challenge is when it's time, there's no flag that goes up and says it's time to move into being proactive. I think you always have to be feeling that that's the goal and be looking for ways to distill your knowledge and get better at it. So I think it's natural, but it's also a little dangerous, right? Because we can easily get sucked into a reactive mode and it can be very difficult to get out. But I do think that's a fair comment from Josh. Good one.
Gotcha. Very good. So Roxy asked a question. So speaking of this whole kind of reactive, proactive, so her question is more like, how do you remedy when you and your team just flat out miss a mark, whether it's a deadline or a break or a failure in the product? Like, how do you kind of remedy that without it completely damaging the relationship?
Oh, really good question. Let's think about the agent, right? The agent's core wiring is, I exist for you to get results. I exist to help you get those results. And although it's hard to do, I learned eventually that the best thing to do was to get ahead of it and own it very upfront with the client. You say, we missed the mark. We are not achieving our ambition in how we want to operate. For that, we apologize. We exist entirely, you know, to make you more successful. In this case, we didn't do it. I want to make sure that we remedy it quickly and get back on track. Now, I've done 2 things. One, I've done the right thing, which is just to own it. Customers will give you tremendous credit for that kind of sincerity. But secondly, I've used it as an opportunity to reground around business results. If the mistake we made, if the problem actually affected business results, we need to make sure that we resolve it. If it didn't, this is a good chance to demonstrate the disconnect between things that might be seen as problems and things that are, in fact, important to business. And so I actually like to use those crises as opportunities to get everyone back sincerely on, why did we do this in the first place? What are the business objectives of this project? And how do we all connect together? Because there are also possibilities they've failed in certain areas. The more candid you are, the more sincere you are, and the more you connect it back to the business objectives of the project, the more you'll be able to rally people back to that right way of thinking about it and get it back on track.
Gotcha. Very good. No, this has been fantastic. And we're now right at the top of the hour, and I wish we had time to get through all these questions. Maybe we've got a bunch of questions here in the Q&A. Maybe what you and I can do offline, Greg, is kind of go through some of these questions and answer in a follow-up email or something. But I don't want to take everyone's afternoon. But really appreciate you spending the time with us, Greg. Any final words that you want to share, or any call to action, people get in touch with you? Any final things you want to share with everyone before we wrap up?
No, just keep up all the good work you're doing. I love this field and I love the people who do it. If you want to connect with me online, happy to meet people, always interested in hearing your stories. But yeah, just keep in touch and keep up the good work.
Fantastic. Thanks, Greg. Thanks to everybody else. And we'll be back next week. We've got a session. I think we'll be off Tuesday, but we'll be back next Thursday with Mark Bissell, former COO at Jive. I'll send you more details on his. We'll be posting this recording we'll send out the link this afternoon. Might not get till tomorrow, but we'll send out the link. We'll be posting the recording to clientsuccess.com/webinars, and looking forward to continue to chat with everybody. Thanks again, Greg.
My pleasure.
Thanks everybody else.
Bye-bye.
Bye.